The fourth, we believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon.
I have a dream today.
Change has come to America.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
H. Ross Perot was already a mega successful businessman when he leapt into the American consciousness as an independent presidential candidate in 1992. His folksy manner,
and I was down in Texas taking care of business, tending to my family. This situation got so bad that I decided I better get into it.
And his laser-like focus on the economy,
we have got to stop sending jobs overseas,
made Perot one of the most successful third-party presidential candidates in U.S. history. He won almost 19% of the vote in 1992. From the beginning, Perot's campaign struck a chord with those seeking a third-party candidate. He threw his hat into the ring on CNN's Larry King Live.
Number one, I will not run as either a Democrat or Republican because I will not sell out to anybody but to the American people. And I will sell out to them.
In a presidential debate, he attacked both Republican President George H.W. Bush and Democratic challenger Bill Clinton with equal vigor about the nation's debt.
Now, it's not the Republicans' fault, of course, and it's not the Democrats' fault. And what I'm looking for is who did it.
Perot also directly challenged both candidates' support of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. Perot feared it would cause the loss of American jobs.
There will be a giant sucking sound going south.
Perot's campaign against NAFTA continued beyond the presidential race. The Clinton White House responded with a challenge, a one-on-one debate with Vice President Al Gore, live on CNN with Larry King as moderator.
Yeah, I'm listening. Okay. I haven't heard the answer, but go ahead.
Look at Al.
That's because you haven't quit talking.
Well, I'm listening. How do you stop it without NAFTA?
Okay. Are you going to listen? Work on it.
That was, you got to work on it. You got to work on it is what you got to do. You can't hunt a flock of geese. You can't hunt a flock of eagles. They don't flock. That dog don't hunt. You remember Ross Perot? Does everybody remember Ross Perot? He's like the first third-party candidate of my lifetime. Yeah. Oh, I remember him. He was like, I don't know. He was like a goofball politician, but he was very likable, is what it is. You remember when goofball politicians who said really strange things were somewhat likable and didn't get elected? Remember that, everybody? Remember that? Those were the good old days. Just for those of you who don't remember the freaking 90s, okay? I mean, calling Trump a goofball be like saying Idi Amin is, zany. I mean, if our political culture was sane, then Trump would have been laughed off the stage, or at least, mocked by, Dana Carvey in 2016. He would just be the clown that he really is, but that's not how it happened. So there's really no comparing H. Ross Perot to Donald Trump, because H. Ross Perot was a successful businessman. He was a successful businessman who could not get elected because he was too eccentric. And Trump is an unsuccessful, a failed businessman who got elected because he's bat crap crazy and people wanted that. Can you believe this stuff? I mean, everybody remembers his famous expression. Ross Perot was like, if you pass NAFTA, you're going to have a giant sucking sound. And then Trump shredded NAFTA and replaced it with his own sucking, is what it is, because there's no real replacement for NAFTA. But I loved covering H. Ross Perot. He had charts, he had graphs, he had sayings, he had crazy stuff. I mean, it was like, the deficit is like trash. It's like trash, and you got to take out the trash, and you got to cut it open, you got to stab it. You got to stab it, and take out the roosters, and then get rid of the cobwebs and clean out your barn. And everybody went, yeah. He was such a character. And then there was this big conspiracy about him too. Something about invading George W. Bush's daughter's wedding. Does anybody remember this stuff about H. Ross? You got to take your mother out to the shower. You got to soap her up and then pat her down. And everybody went, yeah. Yeah, he got like 20% of the vote. I think he got 19% of the vote. He was like a really successful third-party candidate, and I don't think we'll ever see that repeated in our lifetime, because now what you get, it's so close all the time that you get like these, you get your two choices, right? You get your Democrat, you get your Republican, there's your big two. And then you get like a green, or you get we don't have a reform anymore, you know, so we get an independent, we get whatever we get. And then that person, you know, takes like 2% of the vote, not 20, 2% of the vote. And by default, one of them wins the electoral college, you know, and you end up with a president who lost the popular vote. Isn't that a good system, everybody? Don't you just love it? What could go wrong there? But that's not even the big news of the day, that H. Ross Perot died at 89 years old. And, you know, you let the fun ensue, like who gets what from that particular. Wow, he had a lot of money. I think he sold EDS, which was his first company. I think he sold it for like, back in the day, he sold it for like $2 billion. And then he had another company, and I forget, somebody bought, I mean, he kept selling his companies, and somebody bought it. A big company, so, you know, and I think they bought it for like $3 billion. I mean, the guy was so freaking rich. It was, you know, like unbelievable. And, you know, he was like, what was his famous saying about being rich? Something like, yes, I'm a rich man, and if you could defend me, you know, that'd be great. But if the tables were turned, I'd show up for you too. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, he was really a character, is what he was, and he did really well. And then just so you know, the second time he ran for president twice. He ran in '92, and then he ran again in '96. And in 1996, see, this is you know, the Clinton magic. Okay, this is the Clinton magic. In 1996, the two parties got together. And they decided that Ross Perot should not be included in the debates, because he was included in the 92 debates. That's the little snippet that we played, was Ross Perot on the stage in between H.W. and Bill Clinton. And then in 96, when Bill Clinton, I think it was Bob Dole. I think Bob Dole knows Bob Dole. I mean, it was such a you had so many characters. I mean, in the 90s, it was just so fun. You know, but now, you know, I mean, Bob Dole, you know, Donald. That's all that was missing was Donald Trump, really. But in 96, they decided that Ross Perot should not be allowed on the debate stage. They literally kept him off the debate stage. So you know what he did? He did like a Tom Steyer move. But Ross Perot was first. He's the one that invented the Tom Steyer move. You know what he did? He did infomercials, and they were amazing. They were so amazing. Charts, graphs, you know, look at this line over here, look at that line over there. You see what I mean? You see what I mean? A person is not an activist if he says the river's dirty. The activist is a person who cleans up the river and then rides the alligator like a stuck pig. It was so much fun. So rest in peace, H. Ross Perot, and good luck to the family of fighting over that. And you know, because his voice was drowned out, and he believed in a balanced budget and things like that. But because his voice was drowned out, his family now, under Donald Trump, will pay absolutely no inheritance tax on billions and billions and billions of inherited dollars. Isn't that a good system? Aren't you glad we do it that way? Because, you know, billions and billions and billions of dollars inherited is sacred. That should never, ever be taxed like labor, like work. It should always, always just pass naturally from one who made the money, because he was a self-made guy. H. Ross Perot was a self-made guy. He served in the Navy. He helped veterans his whole life. I don't know if you know that. But the people who didn't create it, the people who didn't make the deals, the people who didn't work for it, the people who didn't invent anything, they should be left I would say unmolested, but that'll just lead me into the Jeffrey Epstein story. So, and there's really something very, 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 very important, much more important. Well, I don't know what's more important than the amount of lives Jeffrey Epstein ruined. I guess the amount of lives that Trump seeks to ruin in court today. But, yeah, no. Inherited money is sacred money. It should never be taxed. So help me God.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
The Continental Army suffered a bitter winter of Valley Forge, found glory across the waters of the Delaware, and seized victory from Cornwallis of Yorktown. Our Army manned the airports. It ran the ramparts. It took over the airports. It did everything it had to do. And at Fort McHenry, under the rocket's red glare, it had nothing but victory.
H. Ross Perot sounds so lucid next to our current president. I mean, it's just so unbelievable that you have a failed businessman who is a clown who did get elected, and you had a guy who was rather smart and industrious and, rather gifted on, math and things, who, was a little eccentric and didn't get elected. And those were the good old days. I mean, I cannot believe, this clown show that continues. And I can't believe that we have... It's like every scandal, every single one of them is connected to Donald Trump. I mean, if you saw a sex scandal, right? If we saw one, like even Roy Moore and his pedophilia, or do you remember the guy? I bet you don't even remember him. Do you remember Tim Nolan in Kentucky? Does anybody remember him? He was like the vice chair of the Kentucky GOP. Okay, and he had to plead guilty to human trafficking. Human trafficking. I mean, this was unbelievable. He was a 70-year-old former judge in Kentucky. There were pictures of him with Mitch McConnell. Okay, that is just what's her name? That pilot McGrath. Is that her name? McGrath. She's going to run against Mitch McConnell in Kentucky. She's an awesome candidate. She's a real fighter pilot, and she is literally running against Mitch McConnell's swamp that he created in the Senate, saying that, this did not begin with Donald Trump. She's very smart, this girl. I wish her all the best. I mean, if you're in Kentucky and you're like-minded with me, I would suggest you sign up for her campaign and get yourself involved in her campaign, because that woman could actually win. She's formidable. She's brilliant. She's tough as nails. And she's, decorated pilot. And she's running against the Swamp Thing. She's running against the Grim Reaper. She's literally running against Mitch McConnell and trying to show you that the problem started way before Donald Trump. That the problem started when Mitch McConnell created the Swamp Thing that is the U.S. Senate. That, created this swamp where you can't, if you're a sitting president and a Democrat, get a Supreme Court justice to even be heard, even if you have a year and a half left on your presidency. She's really good. But anyway, I digress. So Tim Nolan from Kentucky, he was a 70-year-old former judge. He was arrested, I think, in April of 2017, and he was indicted on 28 felony counts and a pair of misdemeanors, okay? He entered into a plea agreement, and he pled guilty to 21 of the charges that involved 19 victims, okay? And the things that he pled guilty to was human trafficking of minors. That's what Jeffrey Epstein has been charged with. Human trafficking of minors and unlawful transactions with minors, soliciting of minors. Just think about everybody around Donald Trump. Just everybody. Kavanaugh's been accused of raping girls in college, right? And trains. Remember that whole thing with there were trains and they would just go in and out of the rooms. The guys would form lines and, the girls would be like, on Quaaludes or otherwise incapacitated, and they would just take turns with that. Why is it that every single scandal like this, every single outrageous thing done against women and girls involves Donald Trump? How is that humanly possible? He's like the Where's Waldo of sex crimes. It's unbelievable. He's in every single story that has anything to do with sex crimes. Now, yes, Bill Clinton is somewhat peripherally involved in the Epstein story, but that's just like, well... The rich, the powerful, I swear to you, and there is something to the fact that this case is being brought by the Public Corruptions Unit out of SDNY. I'm telling you, there are public figures involved in this. And if there weren't, it wouldn't be brought by the Public Corruptions Unit. And it struck me as strange as Ross Perot yesterday when I saw that it was the Public Corruptions Unit that was prosecuting Epstein. And then I was, believe it or not, on faux news, one vowel movement away from what it does to the news. They were talking to the former assistant director of the FBI. And he was saying that this Epstein thing is just a placeholder. That the only reason why they brought these 2 counts, right, and there's only 2, conspiracy to, traffic minors and, conspiracy and also the promoting human trafficking thing. And that the only reason why they did this was to get him off the street. He's just a placeholder. A placeholder! What the worst thing in the world is about to get worse. What is worse than these privileged, white, disgusting men involved in sex trafficking of minors? I mean, what is that holding a place for? But that's what he said.
I suspect that this, quote, deal of a century was revived and in a big way after that article came out, and the FBI got involved in basically a redo of that investigation. That plea deal should never have happened. This is a zero-tolerance crime. Now it should have been a zero-tolerance crime back then. And I think a lot of people are scratching their heads as to why the Public Corruption Unit in New York and the Southern District of New York is handling the prosecution.
Right.
If you look back in 2008, there were some allegations, and also in that article, that Epstein was providing some of these girls to some pretty high-profile people. We don't know who they are.
Oh, my God.
And that would involve, by definition, public corruption if the charges were suppressed for that reason.
What about that? I mean, you're obviously referencing former President Bill Clinton, the current President Donald Trump, Prince Andrew, and others. The FBI clearly was no comment on what this means as far as the investigation opening the door to others who may have known that this was going on.
Well, clearly, the investigation is ongoing because they're looking for more victims. I think this 2-count indictment is a placeholder.
Oh my God!
I think you're going to see dozens of counts in a superseding indictment in the near future. This is just to get him in custody so they can continue the investigation. Obviously, they're going to argue that he should be detained. That means he presents a danger. He shouldn't be released. So I think a decision was made that this conduct was ongoing, perhaps, and they needed to get him off the street.
Oh, Jesus. So the worst thing in the world is about to get worse. And I know, because the Public Corruptions Unit, it's like, seriously, if this whole Epstein affair had surfaced out of nowhere and it had nothing to do with Donald Trump, wouldn't you be surprised that it didn't? Wouldn't it feel like something was missing? Now, Bill Clinton is involved. It's just a reminder that Donald Trump isn't the only one who's part of this nasty business. It's just that Donald Trump seems to be part of every piece of disgusting, nasty sex business. I mean, Donald Trump is to scandal and disgrace like Marvel Studios is to movies. You know, not every movie is a Marvel movie, but it sure seems like the big ones are.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
Okay, anybody else?
Jeffrey Epstein is a terrific guy.
Well, I knew him like everybody in Palm Beach knew him. I mean, people in Palm Beach knew him. He was a fixture in Palm Beach. I had a falling out with him a long time ago. I don't think I've spoken to him for 15 years. I wasn't a fan. I was not, a long time ago. I'd say maybe 15 years. I was not a fan of his. That I can tell you. I was not a fan of his. So I feel very badly, actually, for Secretary Acosta, because I've known him as being somebody that worked so hard and has done such a good job. I feel very badly about that whole situation. But we're going to be looking at that and looking at it very closely.
Oh, my God. So here's a guy who has 1 million photographs with Jeffrey Epstein. Okay, here's a guy who obviously, palled around, said he was a terrific guy. You know why they had a falling out? They had a falling out after Jeffrey Epstein went to, the county lockup is what it is. He didn't want him around Mar-a-Lago because it would be bad press. It would be bad PR. That's what he's talking about. So, he made all these chummy jokes about Epstein's pedophilic obsession, and now he's trying to create distance, just like he did with this guy, Nolan, in Kentucky, who was head of the Trump campaign in Kentucky. He said, I don't know him. I mean, this is like the Trump MO. You know what I mean? I couldn't pick him out of a lineup. I don't know. See, the thing is that they only live a mile away from each other. And of course, Trump was on his airplane. And of course, Trump was in that, orbit for a really stinking long time. He said he knew him for 15 years. So this is a 30-year thing, okay? And the 15 years that Epstein was doing this, Trump was friends with him and said, yeah, he likes girls on the younger side. He really enjoys his social life. Let me tell you that right there. He loves beautiful women almost as much as I do. And then they had a falling out. The falling out was because Epstein got busted. That's the falling out. And everybody around Epstein got immunity. Everybody around him got immunity from Alex Acosta. And the president of the United States is sitting there saying he feels really bad for Alex Acosta. He feels bad.
Well, I met Secretary Acosta this first time I know when I made the deal to bring him on into the administration. I can tell you that for 2.5 years, he's been just an excellent Secretary of Labor. He's done a fantastic job. Now, part of it is our economy is so good, our unemployment numbers are at record lows. So many good things are happening. But the fact is, he's been a very good Secretary of Labor. What happened 12 or 15 years ago with respect to when he was a U.S. attorney, I think in Miami. Is it Miami?
You think? You think?
If you go back and look at everybody else's decisions, whether it's a U.S. attorney or an assistant U.S. attorney or a judge, you go back 12 or 15 years ago or 20 years ago and look at their past decisions, I would think you'd probably find that they would wish they maybe did it a different way. I do hear that there were a lot of people involved in that decision, not just him. I can only say this from what I know, and what I do know is that he's been a really great Secretary of Labor.
Say it again.
The rest of it we'll have to look at. We'll have to look at it very carefully. But
we'll see what happens.
You're talking about a long time ago. And again, it was a decision made, I think, not by him, but by a lot of people. So we're going to look at it very carefully. We'll be looking at that very carefully.
He's a lunatic, okay? Let me just tell you this. Mitch McConnell actually got... Now, Acosta, this is the crazy part. Acosta was actually confirmed by the Senate. Can you imagine all these acting that have never, ever gone through Senate confirmation? I mean, and McConnell guided Acosta through the Senate confirmation process. It is quite amazing that this is part of and of course Donald Trump knew what was in Miami. Of course he knew who prosecuted his friend for 15 years, Jeffrey Epstein. Of course he knows who Alex Acosta is, and of course it was presented to him before he nominated Alex Acosta. And then, of course, Mitch McConnell had the whole, curriculum vitae, and none of the Republicans, I think one Democrat asked him about this case, and he goes, well, I thought it was a good thing, a guy has to register as a sex offender, and, he goes to jail, so I thought it was a good thing. I mean, all these dirtbag lawyers that are around Donald Trump to the point where they end up in his cabinet, and Mitch McConnell in the Senate actually gets him confirmed, knowing that he had covered up an illegal plea deal that violated the Victims' Rights Act, right? That's the problem with it. It violated the Victims' Rights Act because the victims were never told that Jeffrey Epstein had gotten a sweetheart deal. They were never told, and they were never able to make their victim impact statements to the court, which might have affected the fact that he got to go to the private wing of the Palm Beach County Jail, and that he was out every single day for 12 hours a day, except on Sunday, because that's the day of the Lord. I mean, you look at all these dirt bags, and I can already tell you where Fox News is going with this. They're blaming Obama. I swear to God. Check this out. This just happened on Fox News. They're blaming Obama for Acosta being the U.S. attorney in Miami in 2008. Somebody do the math in your head real quick, okay? Check this out. I mean, seriously.
Of what went on and the situation down in Florida with Acosta, just taking a total look here. Or with Epstein, excuse me.
Well, I don't think people are taking a total look at this because there's a lot of things that go into these decisions. When there's someone like this involved, this does not skip Washington. That means the AG knew about it. That means the investigative agency, the FBI.
Well, as Christine Pelosi said, some of the faves in the Democrat Party may be on a list.
Well, this was in 2008 under a Democratic administration.
Right.
So it's not just Acosta making a decision like this.
Okay. First of all, I'm leaving this up here for just a brief moment. Who the hell is this guy, and why are they talking to him? He's the editor-in-chief of something called Campus Reform. Anybody read Campus Reform on the toilet? Anybody? No. But they're talking to this guy. I don't know. And he's like, well, this happened under a Democratic president in 2008. Obama was elected in 2008. Not sworn in until 2009. This happened under a Democratic administration. No, this happened under H.W. Bush. Under W. Forget the H. Forget the H. He's dead. This happened under W. These are his picks for U.S. attorney. Oh, my God. Can you believe this, Will? This happened under a Democratic administration in 2008. No, he was elected in 2008. Mr. Campus Reform, editor-in-chief.
Other factors go, and if there was corruption, then every investigative agency that was involved with it, including the Attorney General's office, knew something about it.
Well, better get W on the phone real quick. Oh, my God. And that's why Trump is sitting in the Oval this morning going, well, a lot of people, I heard that there were a lot of people involved, You know, they're so stupid. They see 2008, they go, Obama, let's blame Obama. But he was not sworn in until January 20th, and the year would be the year of our Lord, 2009. Oh, my God. I'm telling you, the lawyers around this sexual predator, they are legend. They are legion.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
Now watch this.
Bill Clinton. Nice guy. Got a lot of problems coming up, in my opinion, with the famous island with Jeffrey Epstein. A lot of problems.
Oh, my God. So, he's distancing himself from Jeffrey Epstein, but, he knows about the island. He knows about this. He knows about that. And it's all Obama's fault, and it's Bill Clinton's fault. And meanwhile, Jeffrey Epstein's little black book had 14 different phone numbers for Donald Trump in it. And it wasn't until Jeffrey Epstein got in trouble and was put in the Palm Beach County jail that Donald Trump said, okay, you got to stop coming to Mar-a-Lago because it's not a good look for us. It's not a good look. Now, think about Robert Kraft, too. Robert Kraft, that little, orchid place, the massage place, that's also a human trafficking operation. Where do you think the girls come from? Okay, those are little Asian girls that are brought here and then enslaved by people who own massage parlors that Robert Kraft went to. I mean, there is nary a person. You couldn't spit at a person around Donald Trump and not come up on a sex scandal. It's just a sex scandal. Human trafficking we're talking about. And this is why his description of human trafficking is so freaking vivid. Okay, he's got this human trafficking thing that he pulls out at every one of his stupid rallies with the tape around their mouth, and they're struggling, and they can't, and they're looking in the van, and they see them, and they don't do anything, and they don't say anything. I mean, this is crazy. This is absolute madness. But here's the story of Jeffrey Epstein's little island and his little black book.
You're talking about hundreds of children all over the world.
Victims that were alleged sex slaves of Jeffrey Epstein, that they brought over from Eastern Bloc countries.
I've seen hundreds and hundreds of girls go through Jeffrey's swinging door, his ever revolving door.
This guy is big time. He knows
people that know people that know people.
Flight logs from his plane and his address book read like a who's who of some of the richest and most famous and powerful people in the world. Celebrities, actors, philanthropists, academics, and world leaders.
Oh my God.
It's really disappointing to look, as a lawyer, to look at this circumstance and say, how did this happen? One individual commits one abuse of a minor, in one instance of abuse of a minor, and they're held accountable for years and years through the criminal justice system. This individual abused hundreds of girls, and nothing happened. It's really, really unfortunate. We look at that and we say, how did the criminal justice system fail these girls in such a significant way? How has that happened?
There was ample physical evidence and witness testimony to support the girls' stories, including notepads seized from Epstein's home with their names and phone numbers, along with phone records. Despite the corroborating evidence, Palm Beach State Attorney Barry Krischer wanted to charge Epstein only with a misdemeanor.
Oh.
And once that happened, it was clear to me that justice would not be served by the state attorney in the handling of the case, and we referred it to the FBI. And then there were many, many more victims after that time.
Epstein hired somebody that would impress the state attorney, Barry Krischer, to drop the investigation.
The U.S. Attorney's Office got involved with this case with Jeffrey Epstein's A-list of defense
Ken
attorneys
Starr, Alan
that are extremely
Dershowitz,
well known and extremely
Roy Black,
powerful.
Jay
I think
Lefkowitz,
these
Jack
attorneys were able to
Goldberger.
manipulate the sitting U.S. attorney and the assistant U.S. attorney working the cases. A few things happened in this case that during my law enforcement career I've never seen before. The U.S. attorneys here had an indictment and they were sending it back and forth to Jeffrey's lawyers for changes.
Oh my God.
Never seen anything like that before.
Well, I started getting somewhat of an inclination that this is a situation where somehow, for some reason, the defendant and the government are working together against the victims, although that kind of conspiracy theory sounds so preposterous that I didn't want to believe it.
A subsequent FBI investigation found a sprawling network of victims and enough evidence to fill a 53-page indictment with federal sex crime charges. But Miami U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta signed off on a secret plea bargain, while deliberately not informing Epstein's victims. The deal granted Epstein and his accomplices immunity from federal prosecution. Epstein pleaded guilty in state court to 2 prostitution charges and served 13 months. Epstein's punishment was like that of no other sex offender in Florida. He had a private space in a vacant wing of the Palm Beach County stockade, but records show he spent limited time there. He was allowed to go to his private West Palm Beach office, where he spent up to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, often accepting visitors, including female friends.
Great. So he's offending while he's paying the price for a state charge of offending. Oh my God. So you look at this roster of lawyers, these dirtbags, okay? It's just so unbelievable. So you have Alex Acosta, obviously. You have Alan Dershowitz. Dershowitz was one of the high-end counsels. He's the one that got the sweetheart deal from Acosta. Now, again, Dershowitz is going to say there is nothing wrong with zealously representing the accused. If you consider that you're leaning on a weak-willed social climber of a prosecutor to give your client a slap on the wrist, representing, the most unethical way of dealing with the rule of law, then yeah, you're a zealous lawyer. And what's crazy is Dershowitz has also been accused by some of Epstein's victims as being a willing participant, I'm quoting, who had sex with underage girls. Dershowitz vigorously denies these claims and recently demanded that the women accusing him sue him for defamation so he can have the whole matter settled in a court of law. Sue me. That's his attitude. Sue me. So I could get a discovery and I'll show you that you're lying. Meanwhile, every little bit of this was sealed. Every single thing was sealed. All of the decisions were sealed. And Acosta ends up in Trump's cabinet. Dershowitz ends up on Fox News night after night defending Donald Trump, for God's sake. Okay? There's also Cyrus Vance in New York. Cyrus Vance is, he was the district attorney, and he's knee-deep in travesty. This guy is really another social climber. I mean, that's the only reason I could figure that, he would squelch criminal probes into very rich and powerful men, like when the prosecutors told Cyrus Vance, the DA in New York, that they had an open and shut case against the Trump children, when he let Harvey Weinstein go for years and years after the NYPD got Weinstein on tape admitting to his crimes. Cy Vance also oversaw Epstein's sex offender status in New York, where obviously he lives on East 71st Street. And so he ordered, or it seems like his prosecutors were told to go into court in New York and get Epstein's sex offender status reduced to the least problematic status, like they do it like 1, 2, and 3, and 3 is the worst. Jeffrey Epstein was supposed to be a 3, and he had his prosecutors go in and make a case. Oh, he's not a danger to anybody around him. He wanted everybody the court to determine that, oh, this rich guy Epstein can't be a threat. He can't be a threat, and of course he is a threat. Now he says, oh, I had no clue that my office had a sex offender case involving Jeffrey Epstein, a Manhattan mogul with close ties to Democrats. He said, I really didn't know this. I did not know this. Well, this is very unusual, said the judge. This is all very unusual. I mean, this is just rich and powerful justice is what it is. These are dirtbag lawyers that surround the rich and powerful, that know each other or sit there and instead of, like trying a case, instead of, representing clients within bounds of the law, they sit around, they drink their bourbon, and they create this quasi system of law for the very, 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 very wealthy. The professional mouthpieces for these very, very wealthy men. They don't spend any time arguing the finer points of law and fact. They sit around going, how do we make this go away? Can't we all just get along? There's something in it for you too, you know. And this explains, and I'll say this again, this probably explains best why Bill Barr is covering up for the president and saying things like, well, the Supreme Court is wrong, and we could put a census question on the census if we want to. We can do it if we want to. Like, because he wants to be a Supreme Court justice. And maybe Trump promised him a nomination if, God forbid, Ruth Bader Ginsburg should, expire. These people are social climbers. They have no interest in the facts. They have no interest in the law. They have no interest in protecting vulnerable young girls or children from a third world nation that are fleeing horrific violence or a corrupt government or climate change, which is part of the reason that Central America is so damaged right now. I mean, these lawyers need to face scrutiny. They need to be put on trial.
Mary had a little lamb. The fourth.
We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America. From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today.
Change has come to America.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
I am calling on Secretary Acosta to resign. It is now impossible for anyone to have confidence in Secretary Acosta's ability to lead the Department of Labor. If he refuses to resign, President Trump should fire him.
Yeah.
Instead of prosecuting a predator and serial sex trafficker of children, Acosta chose to let him off easy. This is not acceptable. We cannot have, as one of the leading appointed officials in America, someone who has done this. Plain and simple. Second, I am calling on the Department of Justice's Office of Professional Responsibility to make public the results of its review of Acosta's handling of the Epstein case. Senators Murray and Kaine have called for these findings, but the Justice Department so far has stonewalled, has refused to make them public.
So here's where we are. And can you imagine the filth that we actually have serving that are acting? Acosta got confirmed. Just don't forget that Mitch McConnell shepherded Acosta through the Senate, got enough votes for him to become a cabinet member, our labor secretary. That is sick. It is twisted because there is no way at all that the president of the United States, that Mitch McConnell did not know that Acosta had given a slap on the wrist to a serial child predator who was literally running a pyramid scheme, getting the women, the girls that he had abused to recruit new girls as they would age out of his pedophilic, 14, 15-year-old predilections. I mean, it's just the sickest story. And there's so many people around him that are like that. There are so many people that are you got the Kentucky guy that Mitch McConnell also knew, this Nolan guy, a former district judge. Nolan, who pled guilty to 21 counts of trafficking of minors. Can you imagine the filth that the Republican Party covers up for? Can you just smell the filthy, disgusting, sweaty, grotesque meetings that they have about how to cover these things? Oh, it's just so disgusting. And of course, Donald Trump, he feels bad. He feels bad for Acosta. He feels bad for Manafort. He feels bad for Flynn. A judge said Michael Flynn betrayed his country. Emmett Sullivan, he said, you betrayed your country. And now we got Bill Barr as our attorney general, and he thinks that he is the personal attorney for Donald Trump. Bill Barr is saying the Supreme Court is wrong, and I'm going to put the citizenship question on the census because there's many ways to do it. I'm going to do it because they're wrong. This man wants a unitary executive. He wants a president who literally defies all other co-equal branches of government, including the judiciary now. And didn't I tell you that if they violate any opinion of the Supreme Court, or if they violate any court order, that would be the constitutional crisis to end all constitutional crises? Because still, when they defies Congress, a subpoena from Congress, there's still the judicial branch that has to weigh in. Well, the Supreme Court weighed in on the illegality of the citizenship, and still Bill Barr stands there. And there's another little dirty detail about Bill Barr today, too. I mean, this is just like amazing. I don't know what the chances in hell would be that Bill Barr's daddy. Oh, I'm not kidding. This is thick. These people are thick like thieves, man. Bill Barr's father hired Jeffrey Epstein, who did not have a degree in anything, to be a teacher at the Dalton School, to teach physics at the Dalton School and math. Bill Barr's father. That's how far back these predators all go. It's so sick. So Bill Barr saying that Kirkland and Ellis, his old law firm, and it always goes back to like your old law firm, Kirkland and Ellis had something to do with the defense of Jeffrey Epstein, so therefore he was going to recuse himself from anything Epstein. Today, Bill Barr unrecused himself. So now he's in charge of the Office of Professional Responsibility's report on Acosta's behavior with regard to Jeffrey Epstein, who Bill Barr's daddy hired to be a teacher. A teacher. Think about that. In charge of kids. Ew. But he was asked about, Mueller testifying, and he was asked about the citizenship question. And he goes, yeah, well, the Supreme Court's wrong.
We've been considering all the options, and I've been in constant discussions with the president ever since the Supreme Court decision came down. And I think over the next day or two, you'll see what approach we're taking. And I think it does provide a pathway for getting the question on the census.
He is so smarmy. I can't breathe. And then he said that if Bob Mueller doesn't want to testify, the Department of... Now, remember, Bob Mueller had to be subpoenaed. Go figure. But he was subpoenaed, and he's going to appear a week from tomorrow in open session, right? And the Intelligence Committee in the House and the Judiciary Committee, they're going to have back-to-back hearings. I think that they should combine and do one hearing, period, full stop. Okay, that's just me. But anyway, he said, if Mueller doesn't feel like testifying, the Department of Justice will get his back. We will help him defy a congressional subpoena.
I said all along that I had I would not object to Bob going up to testify, but after I said that, he indicated he was not interested in testifying, and he held a press conference and issued a press statement making it clear that his testimony really was the report itself, and he wasn't going to go beyond the report. So I was disappointed to see him subpoenaed, because I don't think that serves any purpose, dragging Bob Mueller up if he in fact is going to stick to the report. It seems to me the only reason for doing that is to create some kind of public spectacle. And if Bob decides that he doesn't want to be subject to that, then the Department of Justice would certainly back him.
We would have his back if he wants to defy a congressional subpoena to appear. I mean, this is off the hook. This is just this is the sickest administration we've ever had. Okay, really, when the Department of Justice, when the current Attorney General is willing to tell a former independent counsel who investigated the president for 2 years that if he doesn't want to, comply with a congressional subpoena, the Department of Justice will get his back. They are making a mockery of the criminal justice system by turning this whole thing into this giant country club locker room. I mean, the prosecutors that go along with this farce. An attorney general that actually goes along with this farce is totally a social climber. He's just trying to keep himself in good stead with the rich and the powerful, people, politically connected to filthy, disgusting child molesters and human traffickers, so that maybe there's something in it for them, like a Supreme Court seat or a cabinet position. Can you imagine the filth that's really running HHS? Can you imagine the filth that's really running? What's his face? That Cuccinelli dude. He's in charge of Border Patrol. Okay, he's over Border Patrol. He's USCIS. To have that man, these are the filthiest, dirtiest, lowest forms of life, and they are all. And let me tell you something. The heavy lifting that was done for Dershowitz and Ken Starr, who also represented Epstein. Ken Starr, who went after Bill Clinton. And see, this is how you know Bill Clinton never did anything worse than have an affair with Monica Lewinsky. Because Ken Starr was his independent counsel, and Ken Starr investigated everything to do with Bill Clinton's behavior. And, if he had found that he had done something with minors, oh dear God almighty, right? Because Ken Starr and Dershowitz represented Epstein. And Kirkland and Ellis, there was a partner at that law firm. Bill Barr worked at Kirkland and Ellis, and Jay Lefkowitz was a partner, and he was old buddies with Acosta. I'm telling you, they all know each other. All of them. They're totally, totally connected.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
I took on successfully, and I prosecuted the big banks when they preyed on homeowners. I've prosecuted the pharmaceutical companies when they preyed on seniors. I have prosecuted transnational criminal organizations when they preyed on women and children. I know predators, and we have a predator living in the White House.
It just sticks with me. It just does, because that's the right name for what we have in the White House and what we have in the Senate. We have, it's unbelievable. The predators that are in this circle of people, it's never ending. And one is worse than the other. I mean, Epstein almost makes Donald Trump look okay. And that's nearly impossible. This is a guy who has been accused of, God knows, 16 women that, 2 of them have alleged rape, although E. Jean Carroll doesn't call it rape. She doesn't like the word, but obviously what she's described meets the legal definition of being raped in a dressing room at Bergdorf Goodman. And it's always the same. And these girls don't know each other, and they all tell the same story. Oh, he slammed my head against the wall. And then he just started forcibly kissing. I mean, they all tell the same story. How is it possible that Epstein, it almost makes Donald Trump look like normal? These are the lowest of the low, of the sickest of the sick, of the most well-connected mafioso types that all cover for each other. It's the sickest group of men I have ever come across in any administration, in any set scenario. And I've worked for some of the sickest people. I mean, it's radio. There's no barrier to entry. Anybody can mosey on in. But this is a horse of a different color. I know I'm using all these terms. It's because Ross Perot died, and I just want to celebrate his folksiness. You know what I mean? But this is just amazing. So now today, check this out. Mitch McConnell, I told you yesterday that his Ancestry, Ancestry.com. I love Ancestry. I got the most amazing, tree. But anyway, so Mitch McConnell, they did his, and they found out that, his family were slave owners in Alabama back in the day that he wishes to recreate. And that they were all girl slaves. There were only 2 boy slaves. All the other slaves were girl slaves. So they had the temerity to ask, on the press did, about this today.
Were you aware that your great-great-grandfathers were slave owners in Alabama before the Civil War? And has that revelation caused you to change your position on reparations?
I find myself once again in the same position as President Obama.
What?
We both oppose reparations, and we both are the descendants of slaveholders.
That he was so prepared, and he pulled that out of his, little slouchy pants there. I know, gross. But he was so ready with that line.
Randy, did you see the smile, the little smirk on his face?
Oh, he's such an arrogant prig. I mean, really, it's just so disgusting. And that he was prepared and ready with, Obama did it too. Obama, yes, it's true. Obama's great-great-great-great-grandfather apparently owned 2 slaves, and his great-great-great-great-grandmother apparently owned 2 slaves as well. But that Mitch McConnell was so prepared, and the only reason why they're asking him is because obviously the issue of reparations has come up, and he said, nobody alive had anything to do with slavery. Well, apparently a former president and you both are descendants of the cruelest form of chattel slavery in the history of the universe. But they're so willing to blame Obama. Everything has to do. Kellyanne Conway did it too today. When she was asked about, well, Bill Barr says he's going to put the census question, he's going to put the citizenship question. Well, Obama did it too. Obama is the one that took it off. Obama's the one that removed. That is just, what is with them?
Kellyanne, yesterday the Attorney General was down in South Carolina, and he was answering questions regarding the citizenship question that you would like to see on the census. The Supreme Court said you can't do it because of the rationale that was given in those arguments. But
wait, can I just stop it right there? The Supreme Court said you couldn't do it because of the rationale that was given in those arguments. The Supreme Court said that Wilbur Ross lied under oath, saying that his rationale was to enforce the Voting Rights Act when truly it had to do with that guy, I told you, Thomas Hofeller from North Carolina, whose daughter Stephanie, after he died, said, Mom, can I go through Dad's things? The mom said yes. She went through her dad's things, and she found that he, who was a cartographer, was drawing gerrymandered maps his whole freaking life, and came up with this idea that if you had the citizenship question back on the census, which has not been on the census since 1950, that if you put it back on there, you would have a treasure trove of information about where Hispanics live, and it would favor white men answering the census, getting disproportionate, representation in the census, and that Hispanics or people of color would hesitate to answer. But you would have a treasure trove of information, and you could and you could gerrymander all these maps to take into account where the white people live, and then just give one district to all the black people and all the Hispanic people. So like a state like Mississippi, okay, that has An enormous African-American population, it has an enormous black population, has one representative who's a person of color. That's what gerrymandering does. All right. So they asked Kellyanne Conway, and they just whitewash over the fact that Wilbur Ross lied under oath to Congress about the rationale and lied to the Supreme Court, and that the new evidence came in May. The Supreme Court heard the oral arguments in April, and they were about to say, yeah, put it back on the census. We don't, we get what you're doing. Fine. But when the new evidence came out, the Supreme Court was in a bind. They were willing to make a deal, but they were in a bind because there was new evidence that had come the month after they heard the oral argument, so they had a punt. And Kellyanne Conway is just about to blame Obama.
Attorney General said, it sounds like they figured a way to do it. He didn't give any details. What can you tell us?
Well, the Supreme Court did not issue a legal impediment decision. They basically said, come back and give us a different rationale. Why can't we just ask the question the way it was asked for 50 years before the Obama administration yanked it out of there?
The Obama administration yanked it out of there. The Obama administration yanked it out of there. And then here's a little Fox and Friends clip this morning of a breathless woman saying the Obama administration yanked it out of there.
So what the Supreme Court has done has said that the citizenship question, which, by the way, has been on every census since the early 1800s, it was simply removed by the Obama administration in 2010.
Okay, can I just tell you that none of that is true? Okay, none of that is true. The census question, the citizenship question, has not appeared on the census since 1950. I mean, everything is Obama's fault all of a sudden. It's all about Obama. I guess they're tired of screaming lock her up now, and so they're just going to blame the whole thing on, it's Obama's fault. Obama's family owned slaves, and he's not for reparations. Obama took the citizenship question off the census. Obama is the one that, appointed Alex Acosta. Obama did this, and none of it is true. It's so fake.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
Tomorrow, the Fifth Circuit will hear oral argument in the case of Texas v. the United States. The fate of our entire healthcare system hangs in the balance. This challenge to the Affordable Care Act, brought by Republican state attorneys general and regrettably supported by President Trump and his administration, represent the latest efforts by Republicans to dismantle health care in America as we know it. After failing to repeal our health cares through federal legislation, Republicans now turn to the courts.
Right.
And if Republicans get their way in this case, the impact on Americans would be catastrophic. That is not an exaggeration. Catastrophic.
That is the big news of the day, believe it or not. Okay? That is the big news of the day. You talk about millions and millions of Americans like me who, I have Obamacare. I mean, I get my health care through healthcare.gov. Okay? And all the damage that Trump has already done to the ACA is legendary. I mean, the amount of my premiums have tripled. Okay, tripled. It was like a $700 a month thing. It's $2,000 a month now. So the damage that they have done to the ACA is legion. Okay, and millions of Americans' health insurance coverage is being argued in court today in New Orleans. That's the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, where Texas and a bunch of red states decided to, a Texas judge said in one of his crazy rulings that the entire ACA is unconstitutional. And so the state of Texas and a bunch of red states went forward and said that they want the entire ACA, they want that ruling by that judge upheld, and they want the entire ACA thrown out. So that means no coverage for pre-existing conditions. That means you couldn't, if you have a pre-existing condition of any sort, any kind at all, you wouldn't be able to buy health insurance at any price. We would go back to the bad old days of underwriting, and the underwriters would decide what your health care costs, what your health care should cost you based on your pre-existing condition and your history. Do you have diabetes? Do you have a chronic illness? Do you have myasthenia gravis? Do you have, have you had cancer? Have you had a stroke? Do you have, high cholesterol? And they would then tell you whether or not you are insurable at all, and if you are, what price you will have to pay in order to buy health insurance, and what your deductible has to be, blah, 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 before. I mean, it's the thing. And Trump keeps standing on a stage saying that we will protect pre-existing conditions, but they're in court today arguing that the whole ACA has to be thrown out as being unconstitutional, okay? And they are literally arguing the side of the Texas judge, that the whole thing's got to be thrown out, so that if you have a kid who's 25 years old and still in your, that goes away. All that good stuff that's in the affordable, all the, the screenings that are free, and, the 10 essential conditions, that they have to provide, free coverage for, all the wellness screening, all that stuff, gone, everything gone. Now, here's what you need to know, and that is, no matter what this court finds in New Orleans today, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, it is going to go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has 2 times previously ruled that the ACA is constitutional. But we got, a rapist, alleged rapist Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court now. So millions of Americans' futures, millions of Americans have their fate in the hands of the Trump administration today, who are arguing to throw out everybody's coverage unless you get it through your employer. Well, I am my employer. So what does that do for small business owners? What does that do for people like me? What is it? I mean, this is just insane. And that truly is the scariest, biggest news of the day. Despite the fact that we're talking about child molesters and human traffickers and guys who, have been accused by 16 different, President of the United States who's been accused by 16 different women of, groping and rape and everything in between, sticking his hands up their dress on first-class air flights and having to move into coach. And I mean, the biggest news of the day isn't even the worst thing that you could possibly imagine happening to your kid at the hands of a disgusting, sweaty, fat bottomed white guy. That's not even the worst news of the day. Can you even wrap your brain around all this? And it's just so chaotic on purpose so that you can't concentrate on any one horrible thing. There's so many horrible things that are being thrown at us, we're in a cage in a zoo, and the people that are looking at us, are just throwing, stuff at us to see if we'll eat it. I mean, it's just so disgusting. But I did come across a brilliant idea for what ails us. I mean, seriously, a really, really brilliant idea. It's not mine. I wish it were. But we know that we have to win in 2020. And if we win in 2020, what does that mean? What does that look like? Well, that means we get the presidency, we keep the House, but we also have to win back the Senate. Now, we need 4 seats if we lose Alabama, because, Alabama, well, I don't know how we lose Alabama if Roy Moore is the nominee. But there's a possibility, that we, it's going to be a tough seat to hold on to. You have Doug Jones, who, squeaked it out over Roy Moore, the child molester who trolls malls for his, pedophilic desires, hopes, and dreams, right? So, but and Doug Jones' seat is, to have a Democrat in Alabama in the Senate is very, very, very good. But whether or not he can hold that seat, we don't know. Well, in the case that he loses it, we still need 4. We have to win 4 of the seats from the, in the Senate. Or, well, that's what has to happen. Okay, we need 4 seats to put Mitch McConnell out of his misery. Well, for starters, there's a good candidate. I don't know if you remember Amy McGrath, but she ran for Congress She didn't win, but she's an awesome candidate, and she is about to challenge Mitch McConnell. She announced today that she's going to run against Mitch McConnell, and it's going to be tough for her, but God bless her. You know, God love her. She's going to do it. After we win in 2020, how do we restore balance? Yes, we'll have a majority in 2 houses and the presidency, but it will probably only last like a blink of an eye, right? So how do we restore the balance that has been taken away from us by virtue of, let's say, California is a state with 40 million people. It gets 2 senators. So does Montana. See what I mean? Imbalance? Great idea coming.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
All right. So this is a brilliant idea. Did not come from me. It came from this man. His name is Tom Rogers. Tom Rogers is the founder of CNBC. He was also the CEO of TiVo. Everybody remember TiVo? Trump still uses it. Just saying. He refers to TiVo all the time. And anyway, so Tom Rogers is the guy that invented it. And Tom Rogers has put a lot of thought into the Constitution and the representation that tiny little red states get as opposed to giant blue states with 91 million people, okay? So the 10 smallest red states is about 91 million people. The 10 largest blue states is 24 times that. So you have these 10 little red states with 2 senators each, and you have these giant blue states with 2 senators each. And so you have a minority of the country in the majority in the Senate. And it's like, so 5% of the United States population gets their way over 95% of the U.S. population because since the time of the founding, the population has changed and the makeup of the United States, the actual United States, is different. We've added states, lots of states, since the founding. That's number one. Number two, back during the days of the founding, when the country was established, the difference between the populations of the 5 biggest northern states to the 5 smallest southern states was 766,381 people, not including slaves, with a 2-to-1 ratio between the 2 populations. 2-to-1. And now it's 24-to-1, with the red states having this over-representation. So Tom Rogers suggests that we add 2 more states. He suggests that we add D.C. as a state and we add Puerto Rico as a state. If we did that, we would have 4 more senators. See what I mean? Here's his idea.
And speaking of McConnell, the population of Kentucky is about 4 million people. The combined population of Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. is about 4 million people. Puerto Rico, in fact, has a higher population than 21 states in the country. And not only in terms of minority representation of blacks and Latinos, who are clearly underrepresented in the political process, the victims of voter suppression more than anybody else, the gerrymandering decision of the U.S. Supreme Court, obviously further compounding that issue. This would be an indirect remedy for a lot of that, not to mention the humanitarian issues of how Puerto Ricans were treated as second-class citizens, and making them a state would go a long way probably in rectifying that so it doesn't happen again in the future.
Well, I happen to think that's brilliant. Look, we add states all the time, okay? We added Alaska, we added Hawaii. Before that, we added Arizona, we added New Mexico. It's so interesting that the population in Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico is 4 million people. And they're all being deprived of representation in Congress. And the population of Kentucky is 4 million people. And they have the majority leader who is stopping all progress, including Obama's pick for the Supreme Court. And what does it take to add a state? Well, it's just a majority vote of Congress and, a plebiscite of the majority of the territory citizens. So D.C. would have to vote and Puerto Rico would have to vote. And D.C. and Puerto Rico have already voted several times on this. So it would help deal with the, lack of minority black and Latino representation in Congress, but it would also help to overcome the voter repression of minority interests in the states. I think that this is now, of course, we'd have to win the House and the Senate and the presidency in order to, well, not so much the presidency, but we would have to win 2020 in order to do this. Because we would need a majority vote in Congress, and that would take 4 more senators than we have now. But it's a brilliant freaking idea. I mean, he talks about, the possibility of 4 new senators. It's fabulous.
This is simply a way of doing something that we do every 50 or 60 years. 60 years ago, we admitted Hawaii and Alaska. They had about 1/5 the combined population of Puerto Rico and D.C. today. 50 years before that, we admitted New Mexico and Arizona. So every 50, 60 years, we do this. It's about time, and we need to do it given how out of whack Senate control has become in the small hands of a very tiny percentage of U.S. voters.
That's so good. That's so good. So think about it. Alaska and Hawaii are admitted, right? And they have 1/5 of the population of Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. And yet they have no representation whatsoever, like none. Does that seem right to you? Because it doesn't seem right to me. And of course, there are humanitarian reasons for statehood in light of the inadequate federal response to Puerto Rico and the fact that, Puerto Rico can't vote for, various things. This is just so wrong. I can't even tell you. But what a centrist balance that would bring to our democracy. What a beautiful thing. It would reflect the wide diversity of U.S. populations that immediately would change the balance of power. Now, what does Mitch McConnell think of it? Well, they asked him about it. This is old, okay? This isn't like a new idea. But Mitch McConnell, I guess it was a week ago or something, he said granting statehood to D.C. and Puerto Rico is socialism. How is representative democracy, which the founding fathers crafted in the Constitution, and since we're talking all about the census and stuff and counting people and giving them the adequate representation they deserve so that we could enforce the Voting Rights Act, which even the lawyers, when they represented the case to the Supreme Court, said was not true. Okay. Mitch McConnell is saying representative democracy that actually encompasses the actual makeup of the United States of America and all of its citizens, all of them, would be socialism.
You may have mentioned this on your show, but they plan to make the District of Columbia state. That'd give them 2 new Democratic senators.
Yes.
Puerto Rico state would give them 2 more new Democratic senators.
Yes.
And as a former Supreme Court clerk yourself, you've surely noticed that they plan to expand the Supreme Court. So this is full bore socialism on the march in the House. And yeah, as long as I'm the majority leader of the Senate, none of that stuff is going anywhere.
Well, you won't be the majority leader if we add 4 Democratic senators, will you? No, you won't. You'll just be some, distant memory. Merrick Garland's bad dreams. Do you know? And that's where it should be. That's what it. So we need a 2-branch sweep. In 2020, what we need the House, obviously, to stay in Democratic hands. We need to add 4 senators. We need to add 4. So it takes 2 houses of Congress and 2 branches of government to admit 2 new states. It's doable. It's something that when you're voting especially, and I'll bring it up, believe me, I will, after we have our nominee, and people are like very disappointed because this one or that one, or the one that you were supporting from the beginning is not the nominee, or the one that you thought was, your first choice is not now the nominee. Whatever, I am going to remind you that if we ever are going to get to a balance in this country where 5% of the population has as much representation as the other 95%, which is wrong on every level, where there is no minority representation for this whole country in the entire U.S. Senate, except for, Tim Scott, the Republican from South Carolina. Please give me a break. I mean, if we're ever going to return to some sort of a balance, a centrist balance in this country, we have got to admit D.C. and Puerto Rico as states and introduce 4 new senators to this mess. Now, I don't know about the court packing thing that he decided to throw in there, too. I don't think many Democrats are for court packing. But I do think it matters who sits on the Supreme Court, and that's another reason why the Democrats have got to have the Senate. Got to. So in 2020, there's a lot on the ballot that may not just be apparent, but the idea of expanding representation to people of color, to Puerto Rico, to DC, that's doable. And it's brilliant, and I love this idea. I'm all about it. Mitch McConnell, we have got to put that man in the dustbin of history.